Balkis Abdul Kalam spent many sleepless nights reading huge volumes of church history and secular Western writings while trying to find out the objectives of her research. Eventually, she discovered that the many crimes and abuses of the Roman Catholic Church led to huge social upheavals resulting in 5 revolts consecutively. 5 revolutions occurred which eventually changed the West from Judeo-Christian society into a secular society. The 5 revolutions are: 1. The Scientific Revolution, Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton. 2. The Cultural Revolution that came to be known as the Italian Renaissance, Michelangelo, Raphael, Dante, and Ronaldo da Vinci. 3. The Religious Revolution through the Reformation, Martin Luther, Zwingli, John Calvin, and the Puritans. 4. The Philosophical Revolution, René Descartes, John Locke, David Hume, and Immanuel Kant. 5. The Political Revolution, French Revolution, Russian Revolution, and American Revolution. After those revolutions, many Western thinkers quit evaluating things through God. They started using human reasoning to evaluate truth. Beginning with the Cultural Revolution, the Italian Renaissance was caused by the migration of the Greek scholars and texts to Italy after the fall of Constantinople at the hands of the Muslim invaders, Ottoman Turks, in 1453 AD. Nonetheless, the Muslim Turks' invasion of Constantinople turned out to be a blessing in disguise for the West. Firstly, they cut the route between Europe to India, and that led to the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus in 1492 AD. Secondly, their occupation of Constantinople caused many Greek scholars to run to Italy and bring with them Greek manuscripts of the Bible and Greek philosophies and arts. Before that time, there was only Jerome's Latin Bible. In the 4th century, Jerome translated the Bible from Greek into Latin, and that became the standard text for over 1,000 years. The Renaissance came as a result of the migration of the Greek texts and philosophies to Italy. Thirdly, the Renaissance led to the Reformation. Fourth, the Church's princes and knights were busy fighting the Turks' advance into Europe, and that facilitated the spread of the Reformation teachings. The Church would not risk losing its territories to the Muslim Turks, and hence did not take Martin Luther seriously until it halted the Turkish advance and secured Europe. When the advance of the Turks was halted, Luther had become too big to contain or neutralize. The King of Germany wanted to kill Luther after he refused to recant. One of the German princes who supported Luther said in response, "We protest," and hence the followers of the Reformation were called Protestants. Renaissance was the rebirth of man and the arts. Catholicism had detached man with reality. The Renaissance strove to recover the dignity of man without Christ. Dante put the Pope in the hottest part of hell side by side with Prophet Muhammad. The duo resembled the false prophet and the Antichrist, the beast of Revelation. In Bologna, Muslims repeatedly have threatened to bomb the San Petronio Cathedral because it contains a 600-year-old fresco inspired by Dante's Inferno, which depicts Muhammad being tormented in hell. Erasmus also challenged the Church of Rome and said the Pope and the priests were bad people. Universities and schools began to open their doors to everyone. Man began to learn for the sake of learning. This was also the point in time that Marco Polo visited the East and met Genghis Khan. He discovered great things done by the Mongols. At the same time, Magellan crossed the Pacific Ocean and completed the first circumnavigation of the Earth. Renaissance went back to the arts of the ancient Greeks. The arts of the Greeks were real and not just symbols as the medieval arts. The Renaissance was revival without God. Out of it came autonomy, the belief that by my reason I can find truth without God. The Renaissance went back to the Greek philosophies and arts and reintroduced them to the West. For a long time, the Church of Rome discouraged the reading of the writings of Plato and Aristotle. Saint Augustine and Saint Thomas Aquinas had already Christianized the works of Plato and Aristotle, and the Church incorporated them in its main dogmas. So, it came to be that the Renaissance focused on the Greek arts rather than the Greek philosophies. It was the rebirth of man by the vehicle of reason and arts. Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci were great contributors to the Renaissance. Michelangelo did his works during the Renaissance. His works showed that man through reason could rip off the bondage of ignorance and superstition and discover one's true self. The scientific revolution began before the Italian Renaissance. In those days, whoever disagreed with the church got burned at the stake. Plato believed that the universe has perfect forms. The medieval thinkers thought that the planets and stars are the perfect forms of Plato. In the 2nd century, Ptolemy proposed a theory of the universe that the Earth is the center of the universe and all the planets and stars rotate around it. Copernicus rejected that theory and claimed the Sun is the center of the universe and not the Earth. Today, astronomy rejects the Copernicus theory and proves that our Sun is just the center of the solar system. It is one star among 200 billion stars in our Milky Way. Our Milky Way is just one galaxy among billions of other galaxies. Therefore, our Sun is just one star among trillions of other stars. Copernicus also said man is not the center of the creation. His new theory was called Copernicus revolution, and it was truly revolutionized the Western thought at that time. Kepler proved mathematically the theory of Copernicus. Galileo created a telescope and saw what Copernicus and Kepler had postulated. He saw the moon but did not see it as a perfect form of Plato. He saw it as a rubble of rocks. He also could see the ring of Saturn and all other planets. He practically brought about the notion that the Earth and other planets are orbiting the Sun by himself. The Inquisition brought Galileo to the carpet and forced him to recant his assertion. If the Earth moves around the Sun, then why do earthly objects not fall off? Isaac Newton proved that gravity exists and there are laws of nature. According to him, the universe is like a watch or machine that governs by laws. God made a watch and makes it runs by itself, but he is outside of it. After Newton made his scientific discovery, people believed that man doesn't need God. The universe is a machine and God is not within the system. Then, man took those natural laws and put them in the steam engine, electricity, and that led to the birth of the Industrial Revolution. The Earth was seen as a small planet among millions. The universe became this cause-effect machine. In Christian worldview, though man has a physical body that is bound by the physical laws of nature, man can exist outside of this cause-effect machine because he is created as spiritual being in the image of spiritual God. Man is not just a physical body governed by the laws of nature, but also a spiritual and moral being governed by moral imperatives. All the above-mentioned 4 scientists were Christians: Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton. They lived and died as believers in the God of the Bible. Modern science was not possible without a Christian worldview. All other cultural worldviews, Hindu, Buddhist, and Muslim, could not come up with a correct scientific worldview because of their erroneous religious worldviews which confuse man with nature. Nature has been seen as part of man. Muslims believe everything happens to man is written by Allah, and hence man has no hand in his destiny. A thief steals, a prostitute commits adultery, and a murderer kills because Allah has already from eternity written and ordained such deeds in their destinies. Everything befalls a man is his kismet in life. Likewise, Hindus believe in the caste system which freezes everybody in his caste. Moreover, their law of karma teaches that a rich man is born or become rich because of his good deeds, which he performed in his previous life. On the other hand, the poor and low caste Hindus are suffering due to their wicked deeds which they did in their former births. Although the Buddhists don't believe in caste system, still Buddha borrowed from Hinduism the teachings of the law of karma and rebirths. Therefore, the Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists remained behind due to their poor understanding of the world around them. The Protestant Reformation followed after the Italian Renaissance. Martin Luther went back and recaptured the true biblical ideas. Before his Reformation, he truly believed in purgatory. He feared death and subsequently his journey to purgatory. One day, his friend was struck by a bolt of lightning and died. Martin Luther, being scared out of his wits, invoked one of the saints, "Help Saint Anna, I will become a monk." He vowed that he would become a monk if he survived the lightning. He survived and so became a monk. He became known for his many prayers, confessions, penances, and good works. Martin Luther believed the Church's doctrine that man is justified through his works and penances. Later on, the Church appointed Martin Luther to the position of professor at the theological faculty of the University of Wittenberg. He had to teach the Bible to his students. He read the Bible and found what he was looking for in the letter of Paul to Romans 1:16-17. He discovered that the righteousness of God is not something you have to earn. It is given to man by God as free unmerited gift through grace out of love. At that very moment, Martin Luther believed the promise of God and was saved. He never intended to lead a reformation and cause a second schism in the Church. At that time, you could buy bishopric office through money. It was called simony, which based on the story of Simon the magician who offered money to the disciples of Jesus, thinking that he could buy the Holy Spirit, Acts 8:17-19. In those days, the greatest honor in the society was to be a bishop or priest. One could make a lot of money by being a bishop or priest. The Church taught that if one committed sin he was required to do work of penance or pay money. People could pay money to the Church to avoid going to purgatory. It was called indulgences. One could also pay money to get his dear ones out of purgatory: husband, wife, father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, etc. Martin Luther did not like the way the Church abused the lay people through the use of indulgences. He discovered that the Church had created many erroneous teachings which have no scriptural supports. Accordingly, on October 31, 1517, Martin Luther took his 95 theses and nailed them to the Church's door of Wittenberg. He challenged the Pope and the entire Catholic Church. At that time, the Muslim Turks were conducting raids all over the world. They had invaded and captured many countries in Europe. Their Mujahideen fighters reached up to the gate of Vienna. They began to pose an imminent threat to Rome. So fate dictated that whilst Martin Luther began his Reformation, the Church of Rome, its princes and knights were busy dealing with the Turkish invasions. The Turkish Janissaries had destroyed half of Europe in order to Islamize the Christian continent. The Reformation did not want to create autonomy, but it did. In 1455 AD, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press. It put Luther's ideas into print. Its efficiency guaranteed him a wide circulation. The Reformation had many advantages, but it had some disadvantages too. After the Reformation, there was no unified orthodoxy among Christians. There was no means of solving dispute of heresy. There was no one single central authority. There was no protection against heresy and skepticism. Secular knowledge was not going to be addressed. A separation was beginning between the secular and the spiritual. Autonomy was canonized. An ally was provided at national level. At the scientific revolution, autonomy was going to be proven. The Roman Catholic Church did not give up easily. The Church decided to fight against all those who took the cause of the Reformation, collectively accused as heretics. Consequently, the Reformation resulted in bloodbath during the 30-year War between the followers of the Roman Catholic Church and the newly established Reformation churches. 1 out of every 5 Europeans was killed in that long war. The population of Germany was reduced from 30 million to 13 million. The bloody war ended with the signing of the Westphalia Peace Treaty in Germany in October 24, 1648. The treaty ended the war and granted religious tolerance. Ever since, everyone was free to follow the church of their choosing. Christendom was shattered and many new churches came into existence. Religious tolerance implies that, I know that you are wrong but I have to tolerate you. Neither the Lord Jesus Christ nor his disciples ever practiced religious tolerance. They openly and directly confronted and exposed religious errors and religious hypocrisy wherever and whenever they came in contact with them. Unfortunately, religious tolerance is today an important social virtue. No one is allowed to preach the gospel of Christ in workplaces, schools, universities, malls, or any other social gatherings. Schools were forbidden to teach Christianity and the Lord's Prayer was taken out. Religion became a private and personal matter. The 30-Year War, 1618 to 1648, had created a new enemy called secularism. Many factors jointly contributed to the birth and growth of this enemy. After the signing of Westphalia Peace Treaty, some European intellectuals decided to have nothing to do with a religion that caused such a long-lasting war and the resultant bloodbath. This new enemy would turn out to be the real enemy of God and the Church. It is also called the Enlightenment. It is the devil masquerading as an angel of light. It was the result of joint efforts of scientists, philosophers, and novelists. So it all began as the Renaissance of Greek arts. In fact, even the Reformists indirectly contributed to its birth and growth. The Reformation created a vacuum of central orthodox authority. Anyone could come up with his interpretation of the Bible and there was no unified central authority to decide if what he brought was in agreement with the traditionally accepted sound doctrines of the Church. This leads directly to schisms within the Church every now and then until the present day. There are over 40,000 denominations. To begin with, first of all let us look into the conflict between the Church and the scientists. During the 2nd century, the Church adopted the Ptolemy theory which taught that the Earth was the center of the universe and all other planets rotate around it. It also accepted the Aristotelian geocentric view that the Earth is the center of the universe and all planets revolved around it. Notice that the Bible never teaches such a theory. The Bible doesn't teach that the Earth is the geographical center of the universe, but it teaches that the Earth is the thematic center of God's creation. Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo refuted the Aristotelian and Ptolemy theory and taught that the Sun is the center of the universe and the Earth is just another small planet spinning around the Sun. All three scientists were condemned by the Roman Catholic Church. Galileo was forced by the Church to recant his words. Even Martin Luther and John Calvin condemned Galileo. Nonetheless, Galileo's theory did not die with him because he invented a telescope which practically proved what others had postulated. By discovering the laws of motion and universal gravitation, Isaac Newton removed the last doubt lingering around the validity of the heliocentric model of the cosmos, which was taught by Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo. In essence, the Church lost and the scientists won. One important thing needs to be mentioned again: Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Isaac Newton were all Christians and believed in God until their deaths. None believed that they refuted the Bible. All of them believed in the inerrancy of the Bible. They had only refuted the Ptolemaic system, which has nothing to do with the Bible. Secondly, let us look at the conflict of the philosophers and the Church: René Descartes, John Locke, David Hume, and Immanuel Kant. There were many more philosophers who came up with some philosophical theories which conflict with the Church, but these four were the crux of the matter. It said that Western philosophy was like blind men in dark alley, looking for a black cat at midnight. The black cat is whatever they come up with for a unifying worldview. A worldview that would give answer to the existence of God, universe, man, dignity of man, evils, ethics, morality, aesthetic, system of government, theory of knowledge, ontology, etc. They believed that they could do that without God and the Bible. Through Immanuel Kant, Western philosophy embodied the blind men in dark alleys, looking for black cats at midnight which might have been there, but no one could prove for or against. With Nietzsche, Western philosophy became blind men in dark alleys, looking for black cats at midnight which weren't there. He said there was nothing there. There was nothing called truth. The word he used for nothing is nil, from which he came up with his nihilism. With Jean-Paul Sartre, Western philosophy was blind men in dark alley, looking for black cat at midnight which was not there, but I have to invent my black cat. This is called existentialism. René Descartes was a Jesuit priest who put his Bible aside and tried to come up with a maxim that would be the foundation of science and also would provide solid proof for his existence and the existence of God. He was considered the father of modern philosophy and also the father of modernity. He was famous for his cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. He wanted to prove his existence without the aid of God. He doubted the existence of everything including his doubting mind. He concluded that he could doubt everything except his thinking mind. He concluded that, I think, therefore I am or I exist. He believed that he proved his existence. He also believed that in his mind he found some innate ideas implanted by God. While he was trapped inside his mind, he discovered there were other innate ideas which were part of his mind. One of these ideas is his belief in God. Since he exists and God exists, then God is the source of everything. He said Newton taught him that there was no effect greater than its cause. Saint Anselm developed that idea and came up with his ontological proof of the existence of God, see his 1078 AD work Proslogion. A Christian doesn't need to take all these troubles in order to prove his existence and the existence of God. The Bible is the source of his knowledge. Since the Bible says God created everything and created man in his image and likeness, that is sufficient ground for explaining his existence. Furthermore, the Christian knows that he is not only body, but he is spirit and soul too, because he is created in the image of spiritual, intellectual, and moral God. The problem of the Jesuit priest René Descartes, he started when he put his Bible aside and tried to use his mind to prove his existence and the existence of God. The first philosopher to respond to Descartes and refute his cogito was John Locke. John Locke said in response, "You have to say, I think, therefore I am, I think." He argued that Descartes still inside the box of nature and he can't stand out of it through his thinking mind and arrives at conclusion to prove his existence. He still needs his body to prove his existence. Locke concluded that there is no knowledge possible without the physical world or five senses to authenticate it. The mind alone can't prove anything. The response of Locke started the long-lasting conflict between the rationalists and the empiricists, the school of rationalism versus the school of empiricism. The former school teaches that the source of knowledge is the mind, whereas the latter school postulates that the true source of knowledge is the five senses or sense experience, rational knowledge versus empirical knowledge. The rationalists believe that the mind has inborn or innate ideas, whereas the empiricists argue that the mind is tabula rasa, a blank slate. David Hume refuted the theories of both schools and created serious problem for the foundation of science and philosophy, reason and sense experience. According to him, through those two human faculties no one could prove anything. Human mind was inside nature and whatever it perceives come through his sensations. No one could stand out of his mind and see the physical world without his five senses. He argued that Descartes was using Christian assumption and not his reason. He also refuted the postulations of scientists such as Newton, Galileo, Copernicus, etc. He refuted the rationalism of Descartes, the empiricism of John Locke, and the foundation of science. His position was come to be known as the wrecking ball because it destroyed every avenue of human knowledge. His philosophy, which was also known as skepticism, had posed real threat to everything, religion, philosophy, and science. It was Immanuel Kant who responded to the challenge of David Hume and proved that both schools, rationalism and empiricism, possessed a half-truth. He argued that knowledge begins with experience, five senses, but perfected by human mind because it is endowed by some categories of understanding. Descartes called them innate or inborn ideas. Every human being possesses those categories of understanding. Without them, human knowledge, rational or empirical, is impossible. Immanuel Kant argued that human mind was furnished by some prior knowledge. Human mind has a prior or previously organized construct, built-in mental content. This prior knowledge was not part of his experience, but it was already there in his mind. For example, one of those categories of understanding is the law of causality, cause and effect. Human mind begins his knowledge or understanding with those laws and brings them or apply them into nature. Those categories were just pure abstract forms. From this, he named his philosophical book, Critique of Pure Reason. Those categories of understanding were like goggles that human mind uses to perceive nature. Without them, human knowledge is impossible. Animals don't possess those categories of understanding. But, without nature, those categories don't work. They could work only with the help of the five senses. Human knowledge begins with the senses and is perfected within the mind. Every human being sees with the same organized construct. Everything man perceives has to be objective, universal, repeatable, and confined to space and time. Human mind cannot know otherwise. Kant rejected the possibility of any spiritual and psychological knowledge or any private knowledge. He believed that he has refuted all the proofs of the existence of God. He argued that man cannot prove the existence of God, nor could he refute the existence of God. Man could see reality, but as his mind perceives it. Human mind can know reality with certainty, but he cannot operate absolutely. Man could see the phenomena, the physical object as it appears to him, but he could not see the noumena, the object in itself. He could see the physical objects as they appear to him, but he could not see them as they are, and he could not know whence they come from. Human mind has the capacity to intuit first space and time and then uses them as pure forms where he can see the physical world around him. Without space and time, human knowledge is impossible. Galileo, Descartes, Locke, and Kant distinguished between the primary qualities and the secondary qualities of the physical world. Primary qualities are thought to be properties of objects that are independent of any observer, such as solidity, extension, motion, number, and figure. Secondary qualities are thought to be properties that produce sensations in observers, such as color, taste, smell, and sound. The objects we see have in them primary qualities, but human mind supplies to them the secondary qualities. Therefore, the physical objects around us, and that include our bodies, are colorless, tasteless, smellless, and soundless. Kantian philosophy created even more serious problem than that of Hume's skepticism. He came up with agnosticism, an intellectual doctrine or attitude affirming the uncertainty of all claims to ultimate knowledge. His philosophy produced the Enlightenment. It was employed by the Enlightenment's thinkers such as Rousseau, Voltaire, Nietzsche, and the like, who categorically oppose any claim to spiritual or metaphysical knowledge. Kant said the story of the Bible is not possible for human mind because it is an upper story and human mind cannot know anything beyond space and time. Kant supposedly proved that human beings cannot know anything beyond space and time, and hence he allegedly refuted the proofs of the existence of God. Human mind cannot prove the existence of God, nor can it disprove the existence of God. Immanuel Kant, therefore, has ended the philosophical quest for the truth. According to him, man cannot know anything spiritual or metaphysical, incorporeal beings such as God, angels, devils, how the universe began, where we came from, life after death, etc. Kant contended that although human mind is haunted with those big questions, but it has not been furnished by nature to answer them. He rejected the innate ideas of Descartes because they don't belong to sense experience. He renamed them pure forms or categories of understanding. Immanuel Kant gave the enemies of the Church and God their first weapon. With Kant began the downward descending into darkness which called Enlightenment, modernism, humanism, Darwinism, atheism, feminism, existentialism, postmodernism, multiculturalism, and so on. First of all, the Bible never tries to prove the existence of God. The first chapter and the first verse of the Bible, Genesis 1:1, postulated the existence of God, which is natural knowledge, or innate idea, implanted by God in the mind of every human being. In Romans 1:19-21, the Bible said that every human being knows God. Even the devils believe in God and tremble, James 2:19. Every human being says that there is no God is a liar or a fool, Psalm 14:1. No one is born an atheist. People go to school to learn atheism. Before Charles Darwin proposed his theory of evolution, atheists have nothing to hold to except their blind faith in atheism. Evolution made atheism an intellectual possibility for alternative belief in God and His creation. Most of those who hold to evolution use it as cover-up for their moral perversion. Evolution is unproved theory, but it is taught in schools as established fact. Evolution justifies racism, white supremacy, slavery, mass genocide, Nazism, Marxism, communism, New Age, New World Order, etc. Some races are more evolved and favored than other races. The full title of the book of Charles Darwin is The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or Preservation of Favored Races in Struggle for Life. Some races are more favored by nature than other races. The less evolved and favored races need to be destroyed by the more favored in order to speed the process of evolution. Darwin believed that the natives of the Americas and the blacks of Africa and Australia were mere animals or less evolved apes. Wherefore, Darwin wrote that, the civilized races, the favored races, the westerners of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. Charles Darwin, The Descent of Man, Chapter 3, and World Book of Encyclopedia 1952, page 336. Evolution destroys the faith of millions of Christian children who join public schools. 75% of all children raised in Christian homes who attend public schools will reject the Christian faith by their first year in college. The Dangers of Evolution by Kent Hovind. Rousseau was the first one to apply the agnosticism of Kant. He said Kant proved that there was nothing called divine knowledge. We should not submit to kings because there was no divine right by which the kings rule. The notion that the kings have divine right to rule is an antiquated and outdated Christian idea which we have shown to be untrue and cannot be proven to be true. Government should be by right consent. Rousseau returned to the Greeks and borrowed their model of democracy, the rule of the majority. The rulers should be appointed by the people and rule by consent of their subjects. If the subjects don't want them, they can revolt and kick them out of office and bring others to rule them. The Bible said, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established." The authorities that exist have been established by God. Therefore whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. Romans 13, 1-2. Rousseau went against the Bible and reintroduced a secular model of government. He argued that there was no divine right by which these kings rule, the rulers should be appointed by reason. Based on his argument, many regicides took place in Europe. In 1688 AD England deposed their royals, and in 1793 AD, France put their king and queen to death. Voltaire did not come up with new ideas but preached Rousseau. Rousseau's philosophy also led to the French Revolution, where the people revolted and took the king and cut his head off. They also sent the queen to the guillotine and took a prostitute from the streets and crowned her the goddess of reason. Many nobles, priests, and other laity were killed. Christianity was banned in France and many churches were transformed into temples of reason. The cult of reason, which based on the ideals of atheism and humanism, was created to replace Christianity. After de-Christianization of French society, the cult of reason was supposed to be spread all over the world with the belief to rid man of the superstitions of God and religion. Before spreading out of Paris, the cult of reason was repudiated by Robespierre, who replaced it by his new cult, the cult of supreme being. With Robespierre began the untold number of mass killings of innocent people. More than 25,000 citizens were accused as enemies of the revolution and beheaded by the public razor, the guillotine. Until today, France couldn't able to overcome that atheistic and humanistic period. That bloody period was known as the Reign of Terror. Napoleon took charge and that led to bloodbath too. Rousseau's philosophy also led to the Russian Revolution, which ended in the totalitarianism of Stalin, who murdered 20 million Russians. Later on, a tyrant would take charge in Germany and kill 6 million Jews and lead Europe into a war that would kill 55 million people. It all started with Descartes, who rejected the teaching of the Bible and erected an idol called human reason, which entrapped Locke, Hume, and Kant. This ultimately led to a Christian cult that depended on human reason and disposed of anything that didn't correspond to human reason, such as the Holy Trinity, the divinity of Jesus, the two natures of Christ, deity and human, the inerrancy of the Bible, the original sin, the virgin birth, the miracles, the resurrection of Christ, heaven and hell, etc. It also produced a religion called deism, which taught that God is absent and prayer for the weak. Europe was going toward the secular, but America was still held to the sacred. Abraham Lincoln said the foundation of our ethics and the umbilical cord of ethics is the Bible. Harry Truman said our American Constitution is based on Matthew and Exodus, the Sermon on the Mountain and the Ten Commandments. The Puritans who left Europe and came to America nurtured the sacred from the profane. While Europe went in bloodshed and chaos, America had three great awakenings or revivals. Enlightenment ideology plunged Europe into two self-annihilating world wars that led to 80 million deaths. Those were the so-called enlightened intellectuals who followed the man-erected idol of the Enlightenment, upheld the idea that they had a right to kill everyone around them. Man for them was just an evolved animal, evolution, that you beat unto submission, fascism, or just kill, communism. There was no difference between killing a fly and a human being. Pantheism teaches that there is no difference between a dog, a chicken, a tree, a table, or man. The whole universe is divine and it created everything. The universe is eternal and it created itself. Even the false theory of Big Bang has more sense than the stupidity of pantheism. The Big Bang claims that the universe is not eternal and has a beginning, and it came out of nothing. Nothing created everything. The Bible said whoever sheds man blood, by man his blood must be shed, because man is created in the image of God, Genesis 9:6. For them, man is evolved from the apes. Man is a God-intoxicated ape, and the only way to free him from his superstitious ideas of God and religion was to force him to accept a new ideology devoid of any deity. Submit or you shall be killed. It is just the other side of the same coin. Allah is the only God and Muhammad his messenger. If anyone refuses to submit to this belief is to be killed. They are two faces of the same coin and their source is the same, Satan the devil. One kills man as an animal and the other kills him as an infidel. Christ said, "The devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy," John 10:10. Europe had sent 5 intellectual and ideological bombs to America. The first bomb was called deism. God created the world as a clock and left it to run by itself. It is the belief that reason and observation of the natural world are sufficient to determine the existence of a creator, accompanied with the rejection of revelation and authority as a source of religious knowledge. God could be known by human reason and hence no need for the Bible. The last verse in the Bible of Thomas Jefferson, "And they laid him in a tomb." He cut from his Bible everything supernatural. America was still largely spared the European Enlightenment. The second bomb was called Darwinism, evolutionism. Before the theory of evolution, few believed there was no God. After Darwinism, people believed that man could be intellectual atheist. Darwinism could not be proved until today through the observation of fossils. Fossils recordings showed static species as in Genesis chapter 1. There was no place where man discovered evidence of evolution in nature. The third bomb was called higher criticism of the Bible. Lower criticism assumes the inerrancy of the Bible. The advocates of higher criticism applied Darwinian evolution in the Bible. They claimed that the Bible wasn't a supranational book that revealed by God to man, but a compilation of many people's personal opinions of what they believed about God. Therefore, they did not believe the stories of the Bible were actual events that took place in history. The Bible recorded the evolving perceptions of people about a deity. It started as polytheism, God is the God of many gods, to henotheism, God is the chief God, and went to monotheism, God is one God, then the God of wrath in the Old Testament, the Jewish God Yahweh, Jehovah, and finally became the God of grace under Jesus Christ in the New Testament. According to them, the Torah of Moses was not written by one person, but it was compiled by many authors. One author used the name Jehovah, they called it the J document, a second author used the name Elohim, E document, and a third author of the priestly caste, P document, and a fourth author wrote Deuteronomy, D document. Similarly, Moses was just a name used later on to unify all those documents in one book written by one person. Higher criticism started in a seminary in Germany and spread all over Europe and finally beached itself in the States. The advocates of this theory never hold the Bible to be the true inspired Word of God. Many Christian colleges and seminaries believed and teach this. After this, Christianity was divided into three groups: Catholics, Protestants, and Liberals. The first two groups believed in the inerrancy of the Bible, but differed in their interpretations of it. The third group doesn't believe the Bible to be an inerrant revelation of the Word of God. Christianity isn't seen as a blessing to Western culture, but a religion that is holding the society back. Christianity is no more seen as a progressive, but many people seen it as a regressive threshold blocking the progress of man. Nietzsche believed that the greatest boom of Western culture would be the officially recognition of the death of God. Then, he said, his stench would fill Europe. Nietzsche was known for his blasphemous statement, "God is dead." The last bomb was nihilism. It is the logical conclusion to the rationalism of Descartes. Someone called it the bastard child of rationalism. The rationalism of Descartes produced the empiricism of Locke, and the two schools of human reasoning were synthesized in the agnosticism of Kant and finally emerged out of the satanic trinity, the nihilism of Nietzsche. However, the story of Western philosophy would not end at nihilism. Hegel would reject the cold nihilism of Nietzsche and come up with pantheism, where God is everything. According to him, God is the force or the spirit and nature is the skin that God put on. In Hegelianism, God is identified with nature. It is an intellectual resurrection of Hinduism which teaches everything is God. Nietzsche said there is no point on holding to those little God words such as God, Spirit, angels, Satan, heaven, hell, salvation, etc. He said we should get rid of those outdated Judeo-Christian notions. Nietzsche produced Nazism of Hitler, and Hegel led to Karl Marx, who produced communism and Stalin.